Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for the Soundbox reveal? Hello! Hello, hello, hello. Just kidding. And so it actually has a pretty good tap to it right now. The way I judge this is just in comparison to if I put it down on the table here, which then mutes out the back, I should get a really big difference between here. I can hear the rise, peak, and decay of the note very nicely. And there it's very muted because the back becomes completely inactive. On an overbuilt guitar, you actually won't hear much of a difference between lying it on the table and playing it held up off of the surface, because the back is basically acting as a reflector in both cases, whether it's on the table or being held up in the air. And so this one actually sounds pretty good right now, and I can say that because I can immediately compare it to the other number 56 that I'm building right here. And this one, I feel like it's not a huge difference, but I'm gonna have to work on this one a little bit more. This one I think is a little bit closer to the desirable sound I want. And by work on it a little more, I just mean, at this point, it means thinning out the top in various areas. So I just don't get as sustaining of a rise, peak, and decay when I hold this one up. And then here's the dead version. Still an enormous difference between the dead version and the live version, but that's why being able to compare one to another that you have in the same stage is very nice. Okay, so back to number 57 here. We've got a figured, highly figured, redwood top with tiger myrtle back and sides. The rosette is made out of tiger myrtle, figured redwood on the inside radial portion of the rosette, and then some maple fiber strips just to frame parts of the rosette. And that's going to work very nicely with the maple binding that's going to go everywhere else. As you can see, this is not sanded smooth or anything like that. You might think for a nice pretty reveal video like this that I would go through the trouble to smooth everything and make it look all beautiful, but I know from experience not to do that. If you sand your guitar smooth to, say, 220 grit just to make it look good for marketing purposes or to throw it up on Instagram to impress your friends or something like that, if you do that at various stages, like this one right now, then again later after you attach the neck to the body, and then you're going to do it again before you actually finish the guitar, you know, all in the name of taking these pictures and showing it off, you can actually, and are somewhat likely to, sand through very thin aesthetic elements of the guitar, like the rosette and the binding and purfling, which isn't on here yet. And I know this because I've done this. In fact, I have a guitar that's very near and dear to my heart that I keep upstairs and don't show anyone because it's ugly. It's ugly, but it actually sounds beautiful, and I love to play it and hate to look at it. And it's nice, I get to keep that as sort of a reminder of what can happen when you prioritize showing off your instrument at every single stage over actually building a quality guitar. So that's just a bit of a cautionary tale there. If you watched my video on bending the sides for this particular guitar, I mentioned having those bug holes in the sides that would later have to be filled with something after the Soundbox was assembled. Well, I filled them here. There's a couple different, well, there's actually many different things you can use to fill something like that. You can use certain types of epoxies, super glue, ebony dust and super glue, or some other wood dust and super glue. You can stain various wood dusts or use the stain itself with super glue. You can even fill it just with the finish itself, basically leaving it clear. And so what I ended up doing was using this dyed super glue. It's just cleaner than having to rub the ebony dust in and deal with that whole mess. And in most cases it actually looks better than the ebony dust. And this of course isn't sanded back yet. That's why it looks so obvious. It's just piled onto the surface. Once I sand this back, it'll blend in. But the important thing I did here was before I did this fill, I tested it on a piece of scrap and sanded that back to make sure it was gonna look right. And the dyed super glue looks a little bit darker than the dark bands of the Tiger Myrtle around it, but it's within the variation that you see across the whole instrument. There's a little bit of variation in the dark and the light, so it doesn't stand out as a fill, it just looks like some natural bit of variation there. But I can't stress it enough, always test things like this on scrap first before you commit anything to your beloved instrument. And so another thing you may notice here is that I actually made a kind of stupid mistake here in bending the sides. You can see I bent one side basically upside down, right? Because these, ordinarily you would have the figure on each side meeting, but here they're reversed. It's a mistake that at some point I used to make a lot, but haven't made in a long time, and I'm not sure what just sort of tripped in my brain to make me do it again. But interestingly enough, I think this can actually look kind of cool and presents an interesting opportunity because of this pink band right here that runs straight across where the end wedge is going to be. And if I can creatively work my end wedge inlay to incorporate in some way this band that actually runs right through, also conveniently enough, right at the center of the height here. So it can look very intentional, but you'll know from watching this video that it's really just me screwing things up. So figured I'd just come clean on that one. For the rest of the guitar I have some interesting choices here. A zebra wood neck, which is going to present certain difficulties, with a Tiger Myrtle, more Tiger Myrtle fretboard, which is also going to present certain unique difficulties, and a zebra wood bridge, again, unique difficulties. This will definitely be my most challenging instrument for a number of reasons that I'm doing this year. And the main reason for that is that none of these woods ideally fit these rolls. That doesn't mean that you can't do it or that you're going to have severe instability problems from choosing to use these woods. It's just that you have to do certain things in order to compensate for the very nature of these woods. For example, I'm going to reinforce the neck blank with 2 extra rods on either side of the truss rod to protect or to mitigate any problem of twisting that can occur with a wood that doesn't have as good of a TR ratio as, say, Honduran mahogany does. Another real challenge is going to be figuring out what to do with the fretboard, because Tiger Myrtle is significantly softer than ebony or rosewood. I figure I'm probably going to have to apply a finish to the fretboard face as well, which I normally wouldn't do for an ebony board or a rosewood board. And I haven't done that before, so that'll be an interesting new challenge. Figured I'd try it out. Although logically it seems like one of the worst choices for a fretboard. But again, those limitations just present a challenge that I believe can be overcome. And that's how you learn, and I'm hoping to learn a lot from this instrument right here. And in addition to those instability challenges, there's, as you can kind of clearly see here, there's an aesthetic challenge, and that's that a lot of these woods blend in with each other very closely. The color match is very close, and so if I don't frame everything just right in order to, you know, set off the top from the sides, I think aesthetically it's just going to look a little weird, kind of like it does right now. I mean, it just looks a little off without everything being framed by the binding and everything else. So I think that's going to be an interesting challenge. Anyway, that's where I'm at right now. I'm excited to get this thing bound, get the end wedge in there, and then get started working on that zebra wood neck blank.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.